Okay, so we are now in part 2. Tuloy natin yung different impregnating media. So nasa 8 na tayo, guys. So next is celluloid impregnation. So guys, kung kalimutan niyo lahat, ang celluloid, it's for hard tissues for cutting into bones to facilitate the cutting of bones and teeth. So, yun. And with big hollow cavities, pwede sa eyes. Pero usually, bioloid yung ginagamit for eyes and whole embryo. So, big organs rin. Pwede sa celluloid. However, ito usually nakikita ko for hard tissues, okay? So, guys, celluloid is a type of purified nitrocellulose. So, mamaya pag-usapan natin nitrocellulose. So guys, your celluloid has different concentrations. We have 2 to 4% celluloid for thin and small tissues, for medium 4 to 6%, and thick tissues. So advantages: permits cutting of tissue thicker than paraffin wax. So how thick? So for paraffin wax, guys, the average width of tissue ribbon is 5 micrometers. Yan. So more than 5 micrometers, yan, kasi medyo pag matigas yung tissue, yan. So yan, good. Ang celluloid for neurological tissues, it has a rubbery consistency. It's more rubbery than your paraffin wax. So even though you slice it a little bit thicker, it won't crumble, and no heat is required. So it does not destroy enzymes and so on. So very slow. It could take several weeks. So may advantage at disadvantage. Thin sections are difficult to achieve. It's difficult to cut. Ang best sa celluloid is thicker sections, and serial sections are difficult to prepare. If you want a lot of sections to be created, yun ang disadvantage niya, okay? It's very volatile, so it should be used under fume hood. And guys, the blocks and section must be stored in 70% to 80% alcohol. So you just cannot leave your celluloid blocks in an open air. Okay? Kailangan it's stored in alcohol. Yan. Or else it will be discolored, dry, and shrunken, and it's good for photomicrographs. So guys, I made this quick Google search. So, ang nitrocellulose daw is highly flammable. However, yan, may mas flammable pa sa celluloid but it could be flammable, okay? Kasi it's used for gun cotton. Yan, it's purified form. So, yan, just to take note, okay? So, this is a celluloid block. So after this, you should store it in 70 to 80% alcohol. Yan. Brains in 12% celluloid. Ang ganda rin ng itsura. So I cannot find a celluloid on its own. So nasa lalagyan lang. So yun. Ito, celluloid daw siya. So there are 2 types of ways of using celluloid. We have the wet method. So the wet method involves soaking it into 70 to 80% alcohol. Okay, so you don't leave it in ambient room. Kailangan nakasoak. Okay, for bones, teeth, brain, and whole organs. So how do we do the wet method? So fix, then dehydrate, then soak it in equal parts of ether and alcohol for 12 to 24 hours. Yan. So guys, I don't know why they do that. Yan, paki-search. Then you can now soak it to different concentration of celluloid depending on the thickness of the tissue. So, ewan ko kung ba't thick is, since siguro mataas yung concentration, mas maikli yung mga araw, 3 to 5 days. Yan. Sa thin at saka medium is 1 week. And embed in a jar or desiccator and store in alcohol. Yan, ang wet method. So in dry method, guys, no need for storing it in alcohol. Yan. So we just mix chloroform and cedar. So with the celloidine, we add chloroform and cedarwood oil. Ayan, before allowing the celloidine to harden for ice naman. So wet and dry method. So bones, teeth, brain, whole organs ang wet method, dry for ice. Ayan. And we utilize Gilson's mixture. So ito yung mas explosive, guys, and flammable than your celloidine, which is LVN or low viscosity nitrocellulose. Yan. So sections cut from it are somewhat more easily torn than celloidine. And ito, yan, may plasticizer so that it will not crack, like oleum resini and castor oil. And it's more explosive and it's not used in direct sunlight. In Bancroft, according to it, we don't use it routinely because it needs special equipment and non-conventional microtomy techniques, special cutting techniques. Yan. So, andito na tayo sa plastic resins. Yan. So, huwag niyo kakalimutan, guys. Plastic resins, yan, good for light microscopic studies, good for electron microscopy, ang plastic resin. No? So, example lang ha, yung mga malaking version, yan, ganyan yung itsura ng plastic resin. So, guys, kung gusto mong gumamit ng light microscopes, ng high resolution microscopy, if you want to see the ultra structures, yung mga fine detail, guys, plastic resins ang ginagamit, okay? It's for hard tissues and undecalcified bones, okay? So, pareho sila mga hard substances sa celloidine at saka sa plastic resins. So, told you the average of thickness of tissue ribbons from paraffin wax is 5 micrometer. Okay? So, hanggang ganun ang thickness ng paraffin. Anything thinner than that, guys, napupunit na. So, for plastic resin, it could withstand thinner ribbons to be made. Okay? At saka kailangan thinner kasi sa mga high resolution microscopes like electron microscopy into nanometer. Ganun kaninipis talaga dapat yung hati. So special microtomy technique ang ginagamit rin. Okay? Hard tissues and decalcified bones for renal and bone marrow biopsies. Okay? So we have 3 types of plastics, depends on their polymerization. We have epoxy, polyester, and acrylic. So the most common one that is being used is your epoxy. Yan. So for electron microscopy studies, ultrastructure. So if you want to see the literal fine detail, yan. So ultrastructure, sobrang liliit na structures. Ayun. So it allows the sections to be cut as thin as 30 to 40 nanometers. So we have 3 types of epoxies. We have bisphenol A. So it's the slowest to be infiltrated, and cyclohexene dioxide or SPR. Yung brand name to mga to, Araldite, Epon, is the fastest infiltration. Fastest to be infiltrated. So the disadvantage of epoxy, guys, is it reduces antigenicity. So if you are using immunostaining, nababawasan yung antigen niya. So hindi ganoon ka-reactive sa immunostaining. It could sensitize the skin of the workers, and it could affect it could harm the lungs of the worker. It has toxic components. So one component of epoxy is vinyl cyclohexane dioxide. So carcinogenic daw yan. Yun lang. So polyester rarely used. Yan. Kung may use man siya electron microscope, pero epoxy daw is more superior, and we have acrylic. Yan. So we have GMA, polyglycol methacrylate for light microscopy due to hydrophilic nature. So it loves water. And we have MMA. So just an idea, guys. So ganun no, yung mga plastic resins, yan. So it's good for electron microscope, for seeing ultrastructures. And we have here gelatin impregnation. So magkaiba guys ang agar at gelatin impregnation. So gelatin impregnation guys is water soluble. Alam, hindi ako nagkakamali guys sa water soluble. So it's good for histochemical and enzyme studies, and it's when dehydration is to be avoided. Yan. So no need for dehydration and clearing. It's good for whole organs, sabi ni Bancroft, using modification of go Wentworth technique. Yan. For delicate specimen, friable, yung madaling mag-crumble, mag-break down necrotic tissues and frozen tissue sections. Yan. So kung nagmamadali ka, good ang gelatin impregnation. So how does gelatin impregnation happens? So soak it at 10% gelatin, lahat may 1% phenol for 24 hours, tapos 20% of gelatin for the next 12 hours, and 20% of gelatin, walang time. So that's the last. So, doon. So, laging may 1% phenol because it prevents the growth of molds in your gelatin. And guys, pag mag-infiltrate, 2 to 3 millimeters lang dapat kanipes. And we use 10% formalin as the fixative. Yan. So, for agar impregnation, so agar, it cannot withstand alone. Okay? Hindi niya kayang mag-isa. So, dapat, better siya for double embedding agar and paraffin. Yan, ganon. Minsan, gelatin and paraffin. So, for multiple fragments and friable tissue, and for when sectioning on the cryostat, for FNAB and small friable pieces. Yan, pang fine needle aspirate. So, double embedding ang agar. And guys, andito na tayo sa embedding. Ito na yung matindi. So, when we say embedding, gusto ko to, sabi niya, immortalization of tissue presentation. So, guys, once we have made a tissue block, ayan, may tissue block ako dito, nakita ba? So once we have a tissue block, so now you could now store your tissues for a very long time, okay? So for the tissue organs, yan, okay lang na kahit 1 year lang yung mga tissue organs, pero itong mga tissue blocks, once it turns into block, the histopath section should keep it properly, okay? So ganito ang tissue block, yan. So, gusto ko itong pinahiram ng kapatid ko kasi ang pangit ng first, niya daw to, tissue block. Ayan, so andito yung tissue. Mali kasi hindi naka-orient ng maayos yung tissue at masyadong hindi pin-rest down kaya hindi masyadong nakikita yung tissue. So, ganito siya. So, paraffin wax, yung parang candle talaga. So, immortalization. Wow. Pang forever. Okay. So, what are the steps on embedding? So, open the tissue cassette. And check the requisition form, okay? So, double check yung labeling naman, di ba? Don't forget to label kung kaninong patient yon or specimen number. Yan, correct number of tissue. So, in the requisition form, kunyari, like 2 tissue. So, dapat 2, okay? Hindi nawawala yung isa. Okay, so, ibig sabihin, double check the cassette because some of the tissues could go on top of the cassette, yan, or ma-overlook mo, ganyan. So, double check the number of tissue pieces, okay? Then, select the type of mold that you're going to use. And there should be sufficient room for the tissue with allowance for at least 2 2 millimeters surrounding the margin wax. So there are different shapes, sizes of molds, okay? So there should be enough space. It's not too big, not too small. Yan, tama lang. May allowance na 2 millimeters. Yan. Then fill the mold with paraffin wax. Yan. So as hot as 60 degrees Celsius. Yan. And using the warm forceps, select the tissue, taking care that it does not cool in the air at the same time. So, yan, get your warm tissue wax. That's why we have a warmer in your embedding center. Yan. Then place the tissue in the mold according to the side to be section. Yan, ito na yung orientation. The side should be facing down against the mold. Ano ba dito? Kunyari, may box tayo, guys. So, example, guys, this is the mold. Ayan, ito yung mold. So, square usually yung mold, okay? And when you're going to place your tissue, sabi niya, it should be facing down. Yan, you should put pressure. So, kunyari, ito yung mold, ito yung tissue, it should be placed at the bottom of the mold and it should be facing down. So, yung mga layers, guys, it should be facing down. Okay? Para pag tumigas, makikita mo yung tissue. Okay? Dito. At mas madali ikat. Kasi kung hindi mo pinrest down, nasa gitna, ang rami mong ititrim off, mas mahirap. So, re-embed ka na lang. Yan, mas madali. So, dapat yung tissue mo is nasa bottom of the mold. You have to press it down. Add pressure so that you could see the layers of the tissue pag binaliktad mo mamaya. So, mali to. Kasi hindi nakikita yung tissue. Yung sinasabi ko sa kapatid ko, ba't ano nangyari dyan? Yan. At ang ginamit niya dito ng mold, guys, paper boat. Kaya hindi, paper boat. So, hindi ganun ka-sturdy. At yun madalas ang ginagamit pa rin. So, ayun, tuloy, hindi flat yung dulo. At hindi nakikita yung tissue. Yan, so it's wrong. Yan, I like it na mali yung binigay niya sa akin. Para makita natin ang hindi tutularan. Okay, align your tissue. Next, chill the mold on the cold plate, orienting the tissue and firming it into the wax. Yan. So you have to press it down at pressure. This ensures the correct orientation is maintained and tissue surface to be section is kept flat. Okay, so hindi dapat lumulutang yung tissue. Yan. So tusukin ng forceps. Insert the identifying label or place the labeled embedded ring or beads on the mold. Okay. So, yan, may kanya-kanyang type of labeling. Sa amin, nung intern kami, class filter paper lang. Filter paper, yung lalagay na, iiwan natin doon, tapos parang may tail na yung tissue block mo na filter paper. Tapos, ayun, dito, ngayon pala may beads na, identification beads already. And add more paraffin into the mold, into the cassette and mold. Cool the block on the plate. Yan. So, pag nalagay mo na ng, yan. So, place the cassette base on, yan, place the cassette base onto the mold. So, yun, tinakpan ng cassette base, yan. You could add more wax if needed. Cool the block on the cold plate. Yan. Then, remove the block from the mold. So, dapat ganito yung ending. Okay? So, check again the label and requisition form. So, you will start by checking the requisition form. You will end by checking the requisition form. Okay? Yan. So, correct orientation of the tissue is the most important step of embedding. Okay? Kasi, guys, yung rational nun, yung ina-anticipate mo, kung paano mo yung kinat, yun dapat yung makikita mo sa slide. Okay? So, kung baga, gusto mo makita yung mga layers, correct, ng tissue. So if it's a skin, you want to see the epidermis, the dermis, the hypodermis. So kung inorient mo ng mali, hindi makikita yung mga parts, yung mga diagnostic areas ng tissue. Okay, sabi niya, incorrect placement of tissue may result in diagnostically important tissue elements being missed or damaged during microtomy. Dahil mali yung pagkaka-orient mo, hindi mahanap nung pathologist yung gusto niyang hanapin. Sabi niya, so baka yung diagnosis niya normal na. Tama? Instead kasi nasa isang side pala yung cancer, 'di ba? Mali yung pagka-orient mo. Or nawala, kulang, di ba? Next, during embedding, it is important to orient the tissue in a way that will provide the best information to the pathologist. So, at the time of grossing, yan, usually pathologist marks the outside of the tissue with India ink. Yan. So, usually, kung saan, pakita ko na lang. So, just an example, guys. Kunyari ito, bigger version lang. So, liempo. So, nakikita natin yung skin, di ba? Yung fat, yung skin, yung muscle, tapos yung fat na naman, tapos muscle. Di ba? Ang ganda ng layers. At sana yan rin ang mahanap natin sa slide. Nakikita yung mga layers. Therefore, you have to orient it properly na yung liempo, nakikita yung mga parts niya. Okay? So, hindi lang yung skin. Diba? So, pag mali yung pagka-orient mo, yung skin lang yung makikita ng pathologist. Okay? So, what the pathologist does, kunyari naka-receive siya ng, ano ba to? Ng isang organ, sa labas is pinipaintan nila or minamark nila ng India ink. Yan, India ink. Tapos, as a guide na ito yung, kung saan yung may ink, yun yung outer surface ng organ. So, example lang. So that you could appreciate, yan, when it comes to embedding, itong mukhang liempo, yan, maayos yung pagka-arrange ng medtech, ng, ano to frozen section to kasi white. So, ganito yung lumabas, yung ganito yung pagka-orient niya. So, I told you, dapat sa dulo ng block, nakikita, nakalabas, nakausli yung, para mas madaling makat. Okay, tapos, ayan, nung kinat na, ganito, okay, yung itsura, nung na-stain na, nung finokus na under the microscope, ganyan na yung itsura, di ba? Nakikita yung mga layers, okay? So, tama yung pagkakat nila. Tama yung pagka-orient nila. So, example, for with epidermis sa skin, yan. So, I told you, pag gumagamit ng India ink, yung outside surface ng organ yung pinipinturahan, yung nasa loob, walang ink yan, okay? So, this is your guide. So, this is the margin. Yan. So, ibig sabihin yung may ink, yun yung outside ng tissue, okay? And so, just to mark yun, yellow, yung epidermis. Yan. So, since alam mo na yun yung epidermis, so next is dermis, next is hypodermis. So, you should place it in your block, something like this. Ganyan. Dito rin sa baba, yan, yung nakaaraw yung epidermis. So, dapat ganyan yung pagka-orient mo. Para pag kinat siya, makikita mo pa rin yung layers. Okay? So, this is the dermis, epidermis, the dermis, and the hypodermis. So, what else? So, what if it's an elongated tissue? So, pag masyadong mahaba, guys, you place it diagonally on the mold. Okay? So, pa-diagonal. Next is pag tubular. So, pag may like arteries, veins, tubes, yan. Like gallbladder, yung mga gallbladder duct. So, dapat nakikita yung walls, okay? Dapat transverse, cross-section of the walls. Yan. So, dapat ang paglagay mo dyan, so yun, dapat nakikita yung wall. Yung layers ng walls, okay? So example dito, punch biopsy. Yan. So dapat nakikita yung mga layers, yung mga layers. So pero sabi nung so dapat daw nasa baba yung kung may hair or keratin, dapat nasa baba siya. Anyway, bala na. Pero basta makikita yung layers. Pwede mo namang baliktarin eh. Okay? And pag example polyps, yan, curettage, yan, pakisama-sama sila sa gitna. Okay? Sama-sama mo sa gitna. So, kung masyado silang marami, yan, longitudinal. Okay? So, pag dikit-dikitin mo, pagsama-sama mo sa gitna. So, ibig sabihin, hindi nasa four corners, meron isa dito, isa dito, isa dito. Dapat lahat sila nasa center. Kakadikit sila. So, ito guys, so kung tube, dapat ganito. So, kung ito yung mold, ayan, dapat ganyan yung nakikita natin. Ito yung skin layer, so dapat makikita kung may hair man or yung epidermis, tapos dermis, tapos hypodermis. So, pag DNC or mga polyps, yan, dapat lahat sila nasa gitna. If it's a long tissue, diagonal. If it's a gastrointestinal specimen, you should also see the different layers of the epithelial cells. And if it's a membrane, dapat daw pabilog. So, kung medyo mahaba, ayan, pabilog. Swiss roll. Yan. So, guys, so ensure that kung saan yung cut, yan, yun yung nakikita. So, dito, tinan nyo, nakikita yung mga layers, diba? So, ganyan ang mag-orient, okay? Correct orientation of tissue is the most important step. So, incorrect placement may result in diagnostically important tissue elements being missed or damaged. Yan. So, kung paano kinot, yan, yun rin dapat yung how you will orient it. Yan. In laboratories, guys, may kanya-kanya namang protocol. So, kunyari, kung ito yung minarkahan ng depende sa protocol ng laboratory, So, baka facing up. Kung alin yung may ink, yun, face up. And guys, so these are the different molds for embedding. Yan, I want you to read it. Yan, Lookhart's embedding mold. We have plastic embedding rings, plastic ice tray, peel away, and paper boat. Yes. When I was an intern, paper boat ang ginagamit namin. And I want you to read on that. So guys, yan, we have such thing as double embedding. So if the organ needs more support, yan, especially if it's hollow, it's big, like brain, yan, it needs more support, yan. It needs to be double embedded. So kung celloidine and paraffin wax ang magpartner, you infiltrate it with celloidine and embed it with paraffin wax. Yan. Meron na ring agar paraffin, gelatin, paraffin. Yan. Recommended for making small sections of celloidine blocks. Trimming. Yan. So after embedding, and you're ready to section, yan, itrim mo muna para magkasya. Sabi niya, four-sided prism. Pero minsan, basta magkasya sa microtome. Ayan, trim mo. Para, tsaka mapabilis lang rin. So, we don't trim sa mismo, sa tissue mismo, yung lang, surrounding. So, this is what embedding looks like. Celloidine yung white, paraffin yung nasa labas. And they could be stored indefinitely. Now, your tissues are immortalized. So, notice ganitong itsura ng properly embedded block. Diba? Nakikita yung tissue, unlike this one. Unlike this one, hindi mo makita. Yan, nakikita yung tissue because pinrest ng maayos, maganda yung mold, maganda yung paraffin. So make sure your paraffin is clean, is pure, yan, and it's heated well. So when it's too hot, the paraffin is too hot, it could crumble. Yan. So guys, do you have any questions? So please, wag mag-atubili na tanungin ako. So I'll see you again. Bye-bye.